Hello, and welcome back to another update where I cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. It is your host, Weep Union. In this one, we actually start with different set of news as a very serious thing happened in the United States. This is a very sensitive topic on YouTube as it easily gets demonetized. Therefore, I'll keep it brief. But there was an assassination attempt towards Trump where he was shot at, as is seen on the screen. In the video, we see that Trump was in Pennsylvania doing one of his rallies, and during the early parts of one of those, a person who is not yet clearly identified, there's a lot of misinformation going around about it being a specific person, and that the FBI stated that he did so. However, I could not find any source as to the FBI's statement, neither on the FBI site or the FBI Twitter profile. Instead, we only see Western media reporting that it was this person according to the FBI, but I do not find any source to the FBI statement. Therefore, what we see is that the current situation is that Trump was shot at. However, he was hit on his ear and is, under the circumstances, okay according to his own statement. And therefore, there's no health issues related to this. He's not out of the race. He's probably going to be stronger than ever in this race for the United States presidency out of this. However, it is very dangerous that something like this has happened, and my first thought when I saw it is Carl von Clausewitz's On War book. In it, there is a statement, and it says, "It follows that he who uses force unsparingly, without reference to the bloodshed involved, must obtain a superiority if his adversary uses less vigor in its application. The former then dictates the law to the latter, and both proceed to extremities to which the only limitations are those imposed by the amount of counteracting force on each side." What this statement means is there is a deadlock in terms of the violence in each side of any sort of conflict, not just the battlefield. And in this case, an election race, if one side uses more force, then he's going to have an advantage using that more force. However, it would then redefine the rules to include that specific thing. What this means is an assassination attempt on Donald Trump would carry the risk of that being the new normal. That is why the situation is very dangerous, even though Trump survived. But that will be all of my words on that specific topic. Moving back to the war in Ukraine, we start out in the direction of Urozhaine, where the Russians have managed to capture the northern parts of the town. Following my video yesterday, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian lines. As I said in my analysis, it was very difficult for the Ukrainians to set up defensive positions in the stretch of territory that is the long single road positions in the northern parts, and therefore the Russians managed to break through those positions here in Urozhaine and fully capture the town. In this geolocated footage, we saw Russian soldiers in the northern parts of the town, and we also following this saw the Russians waving the flag in the northern parts of the town. Therefore, we see that the full capture of Urozhaine has been confirmed. In the Krasnoorivka section of the front line, we see this geolocated footage of Ukrainian presence in the southern outskirts of the city. This is either of two cases. Either the Russians never really captured this southern part and some positional fighting continues, or the Ukrainians launched some infantry assaults into the southern parts of Krasnoorivka to try and contest the southern part of the city. And this is exactly why I mentioned the importance of the Russians capturing the northern parts of Urozhaine along the lake to prevent any Ukrainian presence from appearing here in the south, as well as expanding a border area here to the western part, where they would be having a buffer zone between the Russian and Ukrainian positions. Therefore, a full capture would allow the Russians to redirect their forces in the north rather than having to spend them in the south, where they would be slowing down their progress in the north by having to deal with the Ukrainian offensive operations in the south. The Ukrainian presence here in the south disrupts the Russian offensive operations in the north, as the Russians would be forced to redirect their forces, both in terms of long-range artillery support, but also infantry units that have to be in the south to deal with the Ukrainian soldiers. In the Avdiivka section of the front line, we see that the Russians have managed to advance and gain a foothold in the eastern parts of Novoslivka Persia, as well as consolidating their gains south of the town, where they're moving along the highway from Umansky towards Novoslivka Persia. So with this, we see that the Russians have expanded their zone of control east of the town, at the same time as assaults are taking place in the northern parts and in the western parts of Novoslivka Persia in the direction of the Ukrainian fortified positions, supply roads, and directly towards the town itself. Over the past few days, we have seen numerous assaults by the Russians, where they are arriving from three separate directions. From the direction of the north, in the direction of Sokhil and Voshchod, where the Russians are launching operations against the river line, supply lines of Novoslivka Persia, and capturing the fortified positions north of the town to then assault directly towards it and gain a foothold in the north. In the east, from the direction of Novopokrovsky, where following the capture of the town, the Russians have now been launching assaults towards Novoslivka Persia, and from the southeast, where the Russians are launching operations both from Umansky and Semenivka towards the eastern parts of Novoslivka Persia. Therefore, we have two directions in the east and two directions to the north, in which the Russians are launching assault operations towards Novoslivka Persia for the capture of the town and limiting the strength of the Ukrainian forces in the area. Further north, in the direction of New York, the Russians have expanded their zone of control northwest of Novoselivka, where they've managed to capture multiple forest areas in an attempt of securing the western flank of the current spearhead into New York. The Russians launched operations where they captured a large part of the southern parts of New York. However, it is not a very wide operation. The Ukrainians have positions in the east and in the west of it, which allows the Ukrainians to be in a position where they can launch counterattacks to each side and attempt to pincer the Russian bridgehead across to capture it and close it off, encircling Russian soldiers. Therefore, the Russians are now working on securing those flanks by launching operations, capturing the fortified positions, and establishing a stronger flank to prevent such an operation from taking place. Therefore, we see fighting taking place on both flanks of the spearhead and at the tip of it within New York itself. Further north here in the direction of Makivka, the Russians have launched operations to the south of it, where they're launching operations along the forest line. This is confirmed with this geolocated footage. Based on this, it is clear that the Russians are now working on three different axes, first to the north of Makivka in the central parts of it, and to the south of it. Makivka itself is currently split into two parts. There is the southern part here to the south of the Russian bridgehead here in the Serbis River line by Makivka, and the northern parts of it. There was a position further north which the Russians have captured, and then the southern parts is currently split between it and the northern part, where the Russian operations here to the south could be an operation towards the southern parts of this fortified position to spread out the Ukrainian forces and attempt to cut off the supply coming from the south, preventing any attacks towards or reinforcements towards the central parts of Makivka, and an operation in the north to cut off and pincer the Ukrainian forces in the north. So we see that there are multiple axes of attack and operations taking place in Makivka to strengthen the Russian positions in the area and improve their possibility of gaining control over the town by launching these multiple operations. And based on this, we see that the current situation continues with multiple Russian assaults across the front line, and the Ukrainian focus is now entirely on stopping further Russian advances and slowing down their momentum in an attempt to grind the Russian offensive to a halt and prevent them from breaking through the Ukrainian lines. But so far, the Russians have been able to consistently advance throughout the past few months, allowing them to gain control over major areas of the front line that are heavily defended, without making any significant breakthrough due to the Ukrainian intensive efforts at defensive capabilities. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out my Patreon for additional content. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.